Are you a good boy, Chester? Hey, Vinyl Community, Elliot here, Lazy Dogs Records, and TC at his channel is TKR Video Central. TKR Video Central. I've already subscribed to him, but I was watching a couple of contest entries to his contest, Vinyl Richies and Rod the Happy Hippies, and they inspired me. I really need to try to do this one because I've got some fairly obscure stuff that I think will be fun to show off to you. Okay, so here we go. He's TC's trying to build up his subscription base, so I'll put a link down below. Please subscribe to his channel if you don't already, and enter this contest. It's a fun contest. Pretty simple contest. We want to show 10 obscure records, 10 records that in all likelihood you wouldn't see any other VC members have, and very few other people might have. So without further ado, I will get started. I'm going to first show you a record that became a huge hit in 1968. How many of you remember Girl Watcher? It was on ABC Records, but before it was on ABC, it was on a small label out of Goldsboro, North Carolina, called North State, because North Carolina is the old North State. There it is, the Occasions, Girl Watcher. And on the flip side is Deal Me In. Okay, the quick little synopsis of this is the Occasions were a band that played the military bases in the area, played clubs. They were a fairly popular band. They had opportunity to record. They recorded in a little closet-sized studio in Greenville, North Carolina, and the record label was North State that put the record out. They were from Kinley, North Carolina. All these are small towns in eastern North Carolina, not too far from where I live. I ended up having to buy this record from a guy in Germany. That's how hard it is to get. So that's why I don't think many people have this. So North State releases this record. It becomes a local and regional hit and is building momentum. And ABC Records contacts North State, which is probably just like a 1 or 2 man operation. And they make a deal. And someone from New York flies down to Raleigh-Durham Airport. They hand them the master tape at the airport. They hand them a check, and it becomes a huge national hit on ABC. But I've got the original 45 of that on the North State label. All right, when I was in college at East Carolina University, Greenville, North Carolina, where the Occasions cut that album, or that 45, the place we like to go to hear good country rock type music was a place called the Carolina Opry House. And Carolina Opry House Productions financed this 45 from one of the favorite artists that played the Carolina Opry House, and artist I had been following even before I went off to college, and that is Bill Early, and the song is Quay-Loaded. Now, Bill was in a band called Super Grit Cowboy Band before going out on his own, and while he was with Super Grit, a very popular regional band, one of their favorite, the fans' favorite originals was Bill's song Quay-Loaded. Those younger than 50 probably don't know what that's referring to. Maybe they do. It's referring to Quaaludes, a narcotic pill, and Quaaludes were extremely popular in the illegal drug world. A lot of people, it was very common in the 1970s. Security measures weren't what they are today with the opiate epidemic and everything, but in the 1970s, people were constantly breaking into pharmacies and stealing Valiums and Quaaludes and Dorvons and things like that to then sell on the illegal market. Quaaludes were a a favorite of people that did that sort of thing. And Bill wrote this song about this girl that loved Quaaludes, and she would come in to hear him play, and she was always high on Quaaludes. She dropped one or two, and then she headed to the bar for a round. All the guys were sniffing round. Why'd you have to go and get Quaaludes again? That's not the exact verse, but it's a paraphrase of there. Okay, so I doubt many people have that unless you live in eastern North Carolina. All right, the next one I'll show you is another 45. I've got 5 45s here. And this is from John Prine. John Prine sings I Saw Mama Kissing Santa Claus. And there he is when he's a little boy. And they've got Silver Bells on the other side. And this is on Old Boy Records, John Prine's record label that still exists today, even though John's passed on now. It's red vinyl. This came out, I think I saw a date on 1981. And how did you get, this is pre-internet, of course. How would you get an album like this? This is not one you're going to find in a store or anything. They would often put little postcards in albums. So I bought a John Prine Old Boy Records album, one of his LPs. And there might be a postcard in there that you could write for a catalog, or you could send a certain amount of money, whatever it might have been, and get this 45, and that's exactly what I did. Okay, and this is my third or fourth, I guess, to show you. And before I went to East Carolina, where the Bill Lyerly Band 45 came from, I did my first 2 years of school in part at Sand Hills Community College, and that's located in the Sand Hills, obviously, of southeastern, south central, southeastern North Carolina, not too far from where I grew up. And I got this 45 from the Bluegrass Tar Heels. And this is Are You Knocking at My Door? And Easter Monday from the Bluegrass Tar Heels, and it's on Clover Records out of Biscoe, North Carolina. Now, who were the Bluegrass Tar Heels? Well, technically not a traditional bluegrass band, because my connection to this band was the guy that played harmonica, and harmonica is not an instrument normally found in much bluegrass music. But Mac Trent was my history teacher at Sand Hills Community College, and he is why I majored in history when I left community college and went on to a 4-year school. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. I doubt he's still living today, maybe, but he would make you laugh, and he made you enjoy history. And so I always have to credit Mac Trent. He would spend 10 minutes each class period going through the roll, and he had something to say. That's probably one of the things that stood out. Something to say to each person. He would pick at you and give you a hard time, things like that. First day in class, I'm the C, Elliot Cruz. He gets to the C's, and I knew nothing about this man. He gets to the C's, and he says, Elliot Cruz, where are you? And I'm here. And he looked at me, and he says, you don't like me, do you? What do you say? No, sir, I like you fine. I don't know you or whatever. But, he would just give you a hard time, and you learn to laugh and pick back and things like that. So Mac Trent, the Bluegrass Tar Heels, playing harmonica on those 2 tunes. I don't know how many of those 45s they printed, but I'm sure they didn't print that many. And the last of the 45s I want to show you is on Geffen Records. So it's a major label, but it came out in 1985. They weren't putting a lot of 45 singles out, more CDs and cassettes at that point. But one of my favorite bands, they're still around today. This came from their only major label release, Dirt Track Date, on Geffen, and Southern Culture on the Skids, kind of a psychobilly, surf, rockabilly, psychedelic, country, straight ahead rock and roll band. That's a good way to describe them, I suppose. They were on Geffen Records, and this is a 45 for Soul City by Rick Miller, who is the founder of the band. It's a three-piece band, and the lineup they have today is the same lineup they had maybe for 25 or more years now. But when they put out Soul City is a fun little song. On the backside is Voodoo Cadillac. That gives you kind of an idea what kind of music you'll hear when you listen to Southern Culture on the Skids. But uh, the Soul City was actually a real place that never quite got off the ground. It was an attempt by uh, a group of investors to start in the early 1970s, maybe it started in the late 60s, but I believe it was early 1970s, to start a self-sufficient African American town in rural North Carolina near the Virginia border. They got some roads paved, a few people moved in, it never quite caught on. So this is their take on a party. I don't know if Rick actually went out to Soul City, to somebody's house and had an outdoor party there, or not, or maybe it's just his imagination. But the song is about an outdoor party called Soul City, and it's a fun song. Everybody likes to get out and dance to that one, and just have a good time. All right, those are my 45s. Now, what about my albums? Okay, I think all over the country and here in the United States, especially in the 1970s, there was a movement that led to a lot of singing groups springing up in local communities, Christian singing groups. Not a traditional choir like we would think of in a church, but a group that would travel and play civic organizations, church concerts, that sort of thing. And we had my small town in Lillington. We had such a group. They were all when it was in its heyday in the early say 71 to 75 was probably their heyday. I was a little younger. I was middle school when these high schoolers were doing their thing. But a lot of them are my friends today. And a lot of them back then were the older brothers or sisters of my friends. All these people were people I knew growing up. And they called themselves the Good News Singers. There you go. And there they are. And I see my cousin in there. I see one of my best friend's sister. I see people I hung out with when I was older. I see friends of mine today. I see people I grew up with and hung out with as a child, and just very cool. And they're all listed right here. And I was able to get a hold of this album. I was going to see if they had a year on here, but they don't. I was able to get hold of this album. I actually got a couple of copies. You see them every once in a while in our community because they were local kids. A friend of mine, her father, she was in elementary school at this point. She's younger than me. Her father had been kind of the patron. He, fixed up a place for them to rehearse and bought recording equipment. It was a big deal. They did a lot to make this very professional. I think they even had a bus at one time that they would go to their engagements with, and they did this album, Good News Singers, Oh Happy Day. I'll show you one I doubt anybody else has. I was so glad to come across this one on Fleetwood Records, Pack Power. And that right there is Tommy Burleson, 7'4", best college center there ever was, bar none. I don't care what anybody else says. This is the man that outplayed Bill Walton. In the national championship game. It's the man that outplayed Lynn Elmore to win the ACC championship in triple overtime. Because Lynn Elmore had beat him out for first team all conference. Well, Burleson didn't take that crap. He showed him who the boss was. Outplayed the heck out of him. But this is a album of of interviews, play-by-play excerpts, that sort of thing, of the national championship team at NC State, 1973-74 team. Most well-known player would be number 44. Right there is David Thompson. Of course, Tommy Burleson, the center, very well known as well. And so I was glad to get. I've always been an NC State fan, and so it was great to find this album. What else can I say about this? Oh, it's a small world. Recently, the local, down on the coast, not where I live, but where my brother lives, the local high school is doing a fundraiser for their athletic department. And when they do the fundraiser, they try to bring in a former player from one of the local big universities like NC State or UNC Chapel Hill or East Carolina University. And one year they brought in Tommy Burleson, the center I just showed you. And he's from the mountains of North Carolina, Newland, North Carolina, on the other end of the state. And one of the things, they don't pay these people a lot to do this. I'm sure they stipend them somewhat, but they don't want to just put them up in a hotel room somewhere. So they asked someone in the community if they would be willing to host that person when they come to town for, be there for 2 or 3 days. And the athletic director at local high school knew my brother was an NC State fan. He's not an alumnus. Neither one of us went to NC State. We just grew up as fans. He knew my brother was a big NC State fan, and he asked him, and he had a large enough house that he could comfortably do that. And he asked him if he would be willing to do that. And my brother said, "I'll be glad to." Tommy Burleson, my gosh, yes. So he had the opportunity to host Tommy Burleson at his home for a weekend, and he said Tommy Burleson was just the nicest guy. Just they really enjoyed it. Good Christian man, and they had got to be somewhat of friends, and so he and my sister-in-law really enjoyed having him stay there. So I think that's a little tie-in, 6 degrees of separation, whatever. All right, now Vinyl Richie is the person to introduce me to, got me interested in doing one of these contests entries with his, and he's a big punk man. So I got to show one punk album at least, just in honor of Vinyl Richie, I guess. This would be from 1979 on Cancer Records. Now that's a punk record label if there ever was one. The Cigarettes and Crawl Right Out of Your Skin. Each one of these albums had a different cover. It was a silk screen or whatever, and they were a punk band made up of the dishwashers and such at the local restaurants in Raleigh area. I stumbled upon this band out one night with some friends who talked about NC State. So right across from NC State campus, across Hillsborough Street that runs by the campus, are restaurants and bars and clubs and stuff like that. And walked into a place, a group of us, maybe 5 or 6 of us, walked into a place called the Free Advice. Great name for a bar, I think. The Free Advice. It was like a $2 cover, live band. The Cigarettes, we didn't know who it was. We weren't punk. We weren't going to punk shows, things like that. And we got in there and didn't know really what to expect, but we were just, looking for a place to go. And over the PA system, there you start hearing these obscenities and these people just talking nasty to everybody in the crowd. And so obviously this is the band before they come out, and they were just talking crap. And so we kind of had an idea what we were in for. And they come out on stage, which was just a corner of the small bar, and not really a stage. And the first song they did was Last Train to Clarksville. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to like these guys and everything. So we had a really fun time at a punk show. I think that was probably the only punk show, real true punk show I ever went to, but we had a good time. Okay, and the next one I will show you is this album, Country Songs I Love to Sing by Glenn Thompson. Now there's Glenn. And this is on Big T Records. I don't know what year this was. I date this probably the late 60s. Now, Glenn was an artist since the 1930s, just prior to World War II, and he he made his living for decades, and actually was very successful at it, using a different business plan than what the artists that we're used to looking at from the 60s, 70s, 80s did, and beyond. Uh, Glenn, the way bands and artists did it back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and some of them continued, and he is a case of someone that continued to do this on into the early 70s, I believe. Uh, you affiliate yourself on sometimes a long-term, but usually a short-term basis with a radio station. Now, radio stations back in the 30s, they weren't in 20s. They weren't playing records of artists. That was considered their competition. But they would have live music broadcast from their station. You'd have a morning show. Your prime shows were your morning shows before people left for work, and your noonday show when people came in to eat lunch. And so he ended up in the Burlington area and affiliated himself with a radio station out of Burlington. And I think maybe there was a couple of stations in that area that at different time frames he was affiliated with. But the business model was you came in and you hosted a show and you sold product. You know, in the latter days, it would have probably been this album. You sold product, people could write in and send you a check, and you'd send stuff out to them. Songbooks would be something people would, songs they said, the lyrics written down in a little songbook, photographs, things like that, and 45s and LPs, things like that. And you would advertise your shows, and then you would do your radio show, and that would be an advertisement for your shows in the local area. And you would have a territory you would play out of. You had to be, you couldn't really, if you spent the night, you had to be able to get back in the car and drive back to Burlington, to the radio station for your noonday show or whatever. If it was a morning show, you drove back through the night if it was a long ways away. But he did this, had his own radio show, and performed like this. He organized a jamboree across the line in Danville, Virginia, I believe it was, that was broadcast on a big, strong powered radio station there in Danville. He ran that for several years, but he did things like this, and was very successful. Now, I don't think he ever had his own TV show with the local TV station, but I've seen, it wouldn't be videotape, film of him in the early 1970s as a guest on a Raleigh TV station. So, there was a synergy there. You helped each other out and things like that. But he was successful and made a good living doing that. So I doubt anybody else has got a Glenn Thompson record. I don't think he ever had a hit, national hit, because that wasn't his business model. It wasn't, I'm sure he would be glad to have one, but he wasn't, that wasn't his focus in trying to make his living. Now, the last thing I'll show you is going to be a test pressing. I'll show you this album is called J.D. Crowe in the New South. The New South is the album, generally referred to as 0044. That's the Rounder Records catalog number, 0044 or 0044. And this is a hard record to find, and it is considered an essential record in bluegrass, maybe second generation best record ever made. J.D. Crowe, Tony Rice, Ricky Skaggs, Bobby Sloan, and Jerry Flux Douglas. So I searched, I had a CD copy of this. You can find the CDs, but finding vinyl copies is very, very difficult. I searched and searched for a vinyl copy and couldn't find one. And they were pretty expensive, just under $100 if you could find one. And I eventually found, for a lot of money, but not, it was less than $100. It was double digits, not triple. A test pressing of when it was re-released one time. They did a second pressing once in recent years. And this is a test pressing from that. J.D. Crowe, the New South test pressing is all it says. and I was able to pick that up. And of course, I doubt anybody. He had 2 test pressings, so somebody else got that other one, I guess, unless it's still out there for sale. And of course, after I got that, thinking that was the only thing I'd ever be able to get, I got an original of that, and people probably have that album, but I doubt they have the test pressing. Okay, so there is my 10 obscure records, 45s and LPs. So if you're not already subscribed to TKR Video Control, please subscribe to him. I'll put a link down below. And everybody have a great day. And remember to please be kind to your neighbors, because we're all neighbors. And